Comics.
Because they have no home.
I'm Joe Getcho, but they call me Captain Banana because I can throw anything and it will come right back to me just like a boomerang. And bananas are shaped like boomerangs, and boomerangs don't have bones. And yeah, that's my Captain Boomerang impression.
And I'm Mike White, and this is the Clean Comic Book Podcast. We like comics because they have no bones. Find us on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast, or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics 1. And that's going to get really annoying if I try and do Harley for the whole episode, especially because I don't really have the high voice for it. So as long as you remember to use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to join the conversation, and make sure that you share your thoughts. I've noticed that we have a lot of viewership on TikTok right now. Almost 1,000 people have watched Joe's kind of testimonial about how Spider-Man is inspirational and stuff like that. So just if you want to, give us a like, that's cool. But it would be really great to hear from you guys. So definitely comment and let us know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, let's get into today's topic, which is going to be all about the Suicide Squad, specifically the Black Vault and Going Sane, two different stories that were written by Rob Williams, penciled by Jim Lee, and there's backup issues that were penciled by various other artists as well. This was published in 2017 by DC Comics.
And after listening to today's review, make sure to check out our after show on YouTube, where we're going to discuss the writer and penciler, the primary penciler, and take you on an even deeper dive into the Suicide Squad's backstory and history. Well, we've got about, I think, 6 or 8 other pencilers. Yeah, 8 other pencilers, actually, that worked on these issues during the backup stories. But that's not really the thrust of the main narrative, so we're going to kind of skip that for time.
Okay. Time is not on our side when it comes to making an hour-long podcast, because we could talk for more than 1 hour.
It really is. Yeah, it's very true. So let's get into our story for today. There's a couple of notes I have about this. So the events of this story take place after Suicide Squad Rebirth #1. But for time's sake, we're not going to include that issue in our review. It's basically a lot of setup, and it's Waller recruiting Flag into the team. So if you're interested in that, you can go back and read that. But it's
kind of like
really
an origin story kind of thing for the Suicide Squad.
It's actually a retelling with almost the same dialogue of Waller's pitch to President Reagan in the 80s comics, except they just replaced him with President Obama. And he's arguing that our government shouldn't be doing this, and she kind of blackmails him a little bit, and it's a little bit of a thing, but that also automatically dates the story, because it's that's the president that we had however many years ago, so it kind of sets it in a certain time. Also, as we mentioned earlier, each of these 8 issues contain backup character stories to highlight a member of the squad. So this, the Suicide Squad, is about Task Force X, a team of supervillains acting as a black ops unit on behalf of the United States under the command of Colonel Rick Flag Jr. Unofficially known as the Suicide Squad, they live up to their name. Each inmate is implanted with a bomb at the base of their skull, and if they fail to carry out the orders of director Amanda Waller, those bombs can be detonated at any time and any place. So the team for today's story includes Deadshot, Harley Quinn, Captain Boomerang, Boomer, Katana, Killer Croc, and Enchantress. Today's mission is for them to retrieve a cosmic weapon known as the Black Vault from Siberia. After being dropped from space into Arctic waters and barely surviving, the team kills their way to their contact, Hack. Using Hack's technopathic abilities, she converts the squad into a data stream, transmitting them directly into the Black Vault. However, upon entry, the team inadvertently activates the very item they're seeking, a Phantom Zone sphere. Emerging from this device is General Zod, who promptly vaporizes...
Zod! Sorry, I had to get that out there.
I think he says some variation of
that,
does
too. Exactly that, yes. And I heard DCUO at that point going, "You will kneel before Zod."
Oh my gosh, he says it over and over.
You will kneel, yes, we know.
So actually on not to sidetrack us too much, but on the note of DCUO, that's actually going to come up pretty prominently in the after show. So make sure that you guys stay tuned for that, because there's a lot of connections between our creators today and that game.
After the show.
Anyway, Zod promptly vaporizes Captain Boomerang with his heat vision and leaves nothing but his ankles and shoes there. So
that was a real low point for me.
It was. So after that, Enchantress attacks the general, but it's Katana and her Soul Taker sword that really injure him. Because as we know, Kryptonians are not immune to magic. So there you go. While most of the team engage with Zod, Hack uncovers a hidden weapons cache, one Harley and Deadshot use to dispatch any remaining soldiers. Unfortunately, they're interrupted by the Annihilation Brigade, Russia's very own metahuman Suicide Squad. However, they're not really in the story much. They're barely an inconvenience. So while Deadshot and Harley fight the brigade, Hack manages to download enough data from the Russians to reopen the Phantom Zone portal. Croc dives in to protect June Moon from Zod, but is thrown through a bulkhead right into the Annihilation Brigade, scrambling them. In the confusion, Flag manages to run Zod through with the Soul Taker and kick him back into the sphere.
All right.
Belched in the middle of my
right in the middle of like the climax of the story.
Right,
you have to have a bodily function, like go pee or burp or something.
That's perfect. Hey everybody, it's this is live.
The secrets of Mike White.
A sphere that once Hack teleports it, and the team now belongs to Amanda Waller, and that actually ends kind of our first trade, or the first 4 issues. So back at the base, arguments ensue over what to do with the vault, and bonds begin to form between Enchantress and Croc. Hack reveals herself to be a Harley. Yeah, they do. Hack reveals herself to be a Harley fangirl and volunteers to join the Suicide Squad, which doesn't seem like a very smart thing, but that's what she
Put
does.
a bomb in my head. Yes, I want to work.
And so we also have Harcourt, who you may have seen on the Peacemaker show and in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. She's sort of an overseeing NSA agent that appears in this story. So Harcourt and Waller decide together that they need to recruit the depowered Zod for the squad.
What a great idea.
But
what
Flag
could go wrong?
says no. Yeah, like that doesn't seem like it could ever go wrong. But Flag says no by firing a bullet to Waller's head, which is barely deflected by Katana. So apparently the Black Vault, despite being under a red sun lamp, begins to drive everyone crazy. The scientists examining the vault start killing each other, and Waller and Flag have a bloody brawl. But while the vault drives everybody else insane, it has the opposite effect on Harley Quinn, making her sane again.
Dr. Harley Quinzel. I can't do the impression as well as you can.
All of a sudden she's like just like, I'm a psychotherapist again, and I'm absolutely normal, and it's like, okay.
And now I can defeat you because I can think clearly.
Right. She actually comes up with like strategy and stuff that normally she would just be doing kind of random things. So while the vault is affecting the people, Hack struggles against an electrical issue that has all of Belle Rev's equipment on the fritz. But she soon discovers that it's not a computer virus, but rather a computer backup that her power is made of Captain Boomerang when she teleported the team.
Boomer's back, baby!
Basically, yeah. Basically, if you've seen any Star Trek episode where they're like storing a person in the transporter buffer, that's like kind of what Hack does with Boomer. So she has a backup of him. While Harley, Croc, Enchantress, and Waller try to delay a waking Zod, Hack uploads Boomer back to the real world. With Digger's mind removed from Belle Rev's systems, the red sun lamp reactivates, as well as all the anti-psychic countermeasures Belle Rev had, which go ahead and counteract the Black Vault. So now Zod is immobilized, but while Boomer is gloating about his single-handed win, he's smashed under Zod's falling body. And I didn't mention this earlier, but something to do with the Phantom Zone has made Zod grow to like Hulk proportions.
Yeah, what the heck?
Well. So they mentioned that with a line of dialogue, but that's why like he's like gigantic when he lands on Captain Boomerang. But sadly, however, while the Black Vault's influence is removed, Harley goes insane again. And that's pretty much what you need to know for the story today. So we'll take a quick break and come right back to discuss.
Like a boomerang.
That's right. It always comes back.
It all comes back to Boomer.
We like
Comics.
because they have no home.
All right. Well, to start off our discussion, I always like to do this. What is your personal history with the Suicide Squad, media, comics, etc.?
So mostly media, DC Universe Online, the video game,
Hmm.
Suicide Squad movies, obviously, Peacemaker. Let's see what else. Oh, the video game, Kill the Justice League. That was
Hmm.
kind of a more recent entry, but like all these things, like kind of like seen the Suicide Squad here and there and kind of know what they're about, but haven't really sat down to read any comics or anything like that. But it's an interesting concept because you have all these people who are basically broken in society. Some of them are
Yeah.
villains, anti-heroes, whatever. And but they're all stuck for, it's like Mission Impossible, but they have bombs in their heads that they have to comply, otherwise, they're out of the game. And it's kind of funny because it's like, outrunning that and trying to escape at the same time as trying to, complete whatever cockamamie mission that Waller has come up with. So that's kind of, I guess, my
Yeah.
quick and down and dirty history. What about yours? Obviously, you've read the comics because you own this one or these two.
So I believe the first time that I heard of them was when I started buying up New 52 stuff.
Hmm.
And I've probably told this story before, but I took a break from comics around the time of Civil War, mainly because it gutted the Fantastic Four title so badly
Yeah.
that I was just like, I think I'm good. I think I'm just going to take a break from this. And I didn't read any comics for a while. And I had always liked DC because of the DC animated universe, but I was like, I don't know where to start. So when they rebooted in 2011, I was like, oh, now I can actually kind of jump on and I won't be
Hmm.
lost. So I think like the first three trades that I picked up just based on looking at the covers were Batman: The Court of Owls, Wonder Woman: Blood, and Suicide Squad: Kicked in the Teeth, which is the first volume of the Adam Glass run, which is the beginning of the New 52 era. So I actually started with a number one. I started with like the beginning of a run, and very quickly, I don't know if it's just that I realized, oh, these characters fit with the tone of what they're kind of doing in this universe better, or what it was, but it became one of my favorite books for the New 52.
Hmm.
And as we'll talk about in the after show, that makes sense because it's one of them that didn't really get hit too hard by the continuity loss.
Sure.
The concept mostly still worked. The changes were mainly that they for some reason decided to make Waller like really like skinny and like sexy looking with like a mini skirt on and like this sort of business top and
Ah,
everything. And I'm like, why did they do
why?
that?
Yeah.
Like so that was a little bit strange, but like everything else was kind of like a heightened or like more violent version of what you get in most of their comics. So I pretty quickly fell in love with it. Like I liked Harley Quinn already. I think I'd only seen Deadshot before in there is a Batman animated compilation called Gotham Knight that came out around the time the Dark Knight did.
Hmm.
And I think Christopher Nolan produced it, but it's a series of like different segments by different animators. And there was one that featured Deadshot. So I had like heard his name, but I didn't really know who he was until I, read the comics. So
Mhm.
yeah, but my original team, the sort of core of it was Harley, Deadshot, and King Shark. Actually, like King Shark was the other guy that was in every issue. Captain Boomerang was around, and they kind of established that he and like Digger and Floyd like really hate each other, but they didn't really get into the why of that or anything. So I kind of figured all that later, but. Yeah, I read all of that in New 52. I read all of New Suicide Squad, which was the next volume that happened after the Forever Evil event, where they restarted at issue one. And then when Rebirth started, I was like, I don't know if I want to pull this title, but I just bought the trades as they came out.
Mhm.
And so I don't have all of Rob Williams' run because it's actually 53 issues long. But I've got like the first 7 trades, I think, or something like that. So a pretty good kind of like picture of what it
Mhm.
all looks like. Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Red Lanterns, right? So we have this group of people
Hmm.
that you really shouldn't be rooting for, but because their characters are
Yeah.
individually so interesting, when you put them together, it's like, yeah, let's see what they do. Let's kick the hornet's nest and see which way they go, that kind of thing. So it's like it's fun to see these stories from like kind of their perspective. And you have like Deadshot who's like, hey, I'm trying to do the right thing. I want to help people. I want to save people, but I'm not afraid that if, some terrorist is holding my daughter hostage, that I'm going to, shoot him and not
Oh
think
yeah.
twice about it. And so it's like always, interesting when they take a curve. It's like these characters
Mhm.
are flawed, but really their morality is kind of like in the right place. It's just that one or two things that they do that puts them in the villain category or the anti-hero category. It's like, hey, he's a really nice guy. He
Yeah.
cares about people. He wants to make things right for his daughter. That's really his kind of like, you know, kind of core. But at the same time, he doesn't want to be put in a position where he's told what to do. He doesn't want to be put in a position where he has
Yeah.
to not do what he wants to do. And if he needs to shoot somebody to get what he wants, then he's not afraid to do it. So it's like you have this
I
interest.
think that. Well, I was gonna say I might push back against the idea that Floyd is a nice guy. I don't know that he's a nice guy
Underneath.
necessarily. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
That's what I mean. It's like you got
Maybe.
this nice guy
Yeah.
underneath, but it's like all the stuff that he does is not very nice
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah. I think I would agree with a lot of them have something fundamentally wrong with them. Boomer
Hmm.
is honestly just an idiot, and he's not even a very good supervillain. Like he has the
Yeah.
one thing that he does really well, which is throw his boomerangs, and he can, as we see later in the story, he can boomerang anything. He boomerangs a rocket into the side of the base that they're trying to break into while they're
Yeah.
underwater at one point. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess he really can. Because Floyd's like, you idiot, you're throwing it in the wrong direction. And he's like, no, Boomer. And
Booma can do it. That's what I
so,
like a really great expansion on his character to be like, it's not about the
yeah.
boomerangs. It's literally that's how he throws things. But it's almost better
Mhm.
than like Hawkeye or Green Arrow because I killed 11 of the Chitauri, like that skit where it's like Boomer can just throw the same boomerang. And even if that one gets destroyed, he can grab another one or he can throw something else
Yeah,
or a horseshoe or his own shoe or,
right.
something. And I don't know. It gives him a little bit more of like supervillain prowess, but it's so ridiculous
Mhm.
that it's like, is that really a useful skill? Kind of.
Well, and he mentioned in one of the backup stories, which was very suspect as far as like what he was describing actually happening or not. But there was one point where he's like, Flasher broke my jaw 37 times with one barrage of punches. And I was thinking, like, yeah, that probably did happen
Yeah.
because, like, the Flash is maybe your boomerang moves at super speed or you have something that you can do to actually hit him. But, like, once he gets to you, you're kind of done. Like, you're not
Yeah.
really that much of a threat to him.
Well, that was
So
what was
it's
awesome
funny
about the video
because,
game, though, is that
oh,
they gave
yeah,
him a way to have, Speed Force like powers, and that it didn't
yeah,
level the playing field, but at least it gave him a somewhat fighting chance. And teamed up with everyone else, then it was like they had a shot at it. And, if you play your cards right, you could take
right.
him down, although it was really it was tough in the game. But my point is
Taking
like,
down the Flash sucked.
oh yeah, it really sucked. It,
I think Superman was the worst, but
oh
but
my goodness.
the Flash was pretty
Like
bad
when they
too.
went up against Zod in this, I was having flashbacks to fighting
Oh
Superman
yeah.
in that game. Like, oh man, I don't envy you guys at all. That's good luck, and you don't even have the powers that we had in the video game. So, yikes.
No. No, it was I I guess we could briefly talk about some of the other characters. June Moon actually is not a bad person at all. Like at all. She just wants to be a graphic designer and like work her career in advertising, but unfortunately she's host to this incredibly demonic entity, the Enchantress, and there is an actual name for that being, and I've
Mm,
written it down somewhere, but it's almost
Khonshu. Oh wait, no,
unpronounceable,
that's Moon
so
Knight.
it's fine. It's like Zumar or Dazumar or something like that. But anyway, it's yeah, Khonshu. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, but really, she's actually a superhero because she's sort of intentionally keeping that thing in check in her
Mm,
own body. And we actually, this is not part of this story, but the opening arc for Justice League Dark in New 52 was that June was like, I want to get rid of this thing. It's ruining my life. I'm like seeing all these horrible things all the time.
Right.
And at the end of the story, they finally came to the realization that like whatever she's going through, it will be 10 times worse for the world if it is not attached to her and it's untethered. So she kind of has to keep it because that
Where else are you going to
basically
put it?
protects everybody else in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Justice League Dark end up having to, put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, and now she's kind of roped with it. So yeah, it sucks that she's on the squad because she's not. I mean, I guess her alter ego is a criminal, but June didn't really do anything wrong. I mean, she's a hero. So yeah.
She's a graphic designer. She just
Yeah,
wants to,
exactly.
do that and not have all this other drama, but she's involved with the Suicide Squad of all things to be involved
Right.
with. Yikes.
And like Waller doesn't need the bomb to control June, she needs the bomb to control Enchantress. So it's like whenever she transforms, Enchantress is like, why would I do anything that you asked me to?
Right.
But Waller's like, because I'll blow up your host and then that'll kill you too, basically. And so that's like the only thing they have to hold over the
And
Enchantress to
Enchantress
kind of
can't
keep
use
her under
her
control.
abilities to remove the bomb because if she
Right.
did, then there'd be no, control
There'd be
over
no
her.
story.
Kind of like, at least with Zod, okay, put him under the red sun, take away his powers, and then you can inject it in there. Okay, I could believe that. Although, once he gets his powers back, if the bomb explodes, would it even hurt him? Because it's from the inside, unless it was a magic bomb. So, like, there's a way you could make that work. But with Enchantress, I was just kind of like, couldn't she just, it's gone? Or like with Tech, like,
Yeah.
couldn't Tech just digitize it out and somewhere else? And she could remove
Well,
it from everyone.
they only have one line about that where after Harley becomes sane, she's like, so you're a fangirl, huh? So are you going to get this bomb out of my head? And she's like, well, it doesn't exactly work like that. I don't know if I can do that yet, but they didn't really give an
Yeah.
explanation. And I was thinking the nature of her powers is she's literally a transporter, but with like information. Like she turns people into digital information and she can move them from one location to another, and she
Hmm.
can also interface with computers. So if she can do that with organic material and she can interface with anything technological, why couldn't she just deactivate the bomb? Like she wouldn't even have to pull it out of her head. She should be able to just go like
Yeah.
Data does with his emotion chip and just turn it off, you know?
Well, and the fact that Bell Rev, when it was losing power, Waller was concerned, right? Because the bombs,
Yeah.
they would lose power for the trigger mechanism. And so that's another flaw because all you have to do is cut power. Well, even if she can't digitize the bomb out, she could do that. Just
Right.
cut the power to the bomb system. But then we see Rick Flag holding this old school giant remote with an antenna with a big old red button on it that's like, I can point this at you and detonate the bomb at any time. And it's like, okay, he is, he's a special ops, kind of guy. So you can't
Sure.
just walk up and take it from him. But again, we have Enchantress, we have Killer Croc, we have, Tech, we have all these people who
Hmm.
really have these superpowers that even if they couldn't get rid of the bombs, they could just take the trigger mechanism from his hand. Like, it
Sure.
seems like it's kind of thin. You can't just recruit anybody willy nilly because there's always a
Yeah.
way of like, how do you prevent them from getting out of it? And giving us a throwaway line like, well, I haven't figured it out yet. It's kind of like, okay, we're
Yeah.
we're saying we just don't want to go there. And I get it,
Yeah.
but it
Right.
makes it feel a lot harder to buy. Like really Enchantress, this being is going to listen to Waller because there's a bomb. That's it.
Yeah.
That's her weakness.
She's
My
like
weakness
this.
is
She's
bombs
like this.
in my head.
It's everyone's weakness. Everyone has the same weakness.
Only when it detonates. That just blew my mind.
um,
Boo!
yeah, it's there was a little bit of information about some of that in the backup stories, but they never really got into explaining the nature of Hack's powers specifically, other than it was kind of like her metagene just activated, which that's the DC equivalent of being a mutant. You had some sort of
Right.
metagene
Or an
and it
inhuman.
activated, and now you have powers, kind of thing. So that was what they went with. But um, it seems like she's incredibly powerful to the level that she kind of breaks the story in a way. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the problem with her being in this story. This is her first appearance. Rob Williams did create her for this story, and she goes on to have, like kind of an arc with the Suicide Squad and everything. But it does seem like right out of the gate, they needed to do a little bit more explanation on maybe limiting that power a little bit, because without doing that, yeah, there's a lot of plot holes where it's like, well, why can't she just do this or do that? And
Yeah.
on Star Trek, they always have to write out their plot conveniences that they have built into the universe. That's just part of writing Star Trek.
Right.
If you want an episode where you can't use the transporter, you have to come up with a reason why it doesn't exist. So you go to Joe Minosky or whoever your science consultant is, and you go, give me a word that might interfere with like a particle stream or something. And he's like, I don't know, stray ions in the Denorius belt, or whatever.
Or in
And
the
it's
mountains, the mineral deposits in the mountains.
yes, there you
They
go. The mineral
interrupt the
deposits
signals.
in the mountains.
Okay,
It's
sure.
the
Could be.
concentration in the atmosphere that makes the whole briar patch work.
I mean, it's
We
an alien world that could literally be anything. So
Sure.
why couldn't it block the technology? So it's like it's
Right.
feasible, but it's grounded in like real science. And I think that's the thing that we both one of the things that we both admire, at least about earlier
Sure.
Star Trek. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Is that it was grounded in that science fact meets science fiction. And so I think because of that, it's kind of altered our perceptions of whenever we read something that has sci-fi notes in it. That's like, all right, what's the grounded science fact that backs up this fiction? We're always looking for it because we grew up with Star Trek, so I think we look for it, and if it's not there, it's something that we like to nitpick. It doesn't like, destroy the Suicide Squad. Oh my gosh, I can't read this comic because it doesn't make sense. It's not like that. It's just kind of more like a fun thing of like, can I find the science fact to connect to the fiction to make this all work? And if I can, it's cool. If I can't,
Sure.
well, no big deal.
Yeah, it didn't destroy my immersion. It was just one of those things where I was like, okay, don't think about it too much. They want you just to accept that she can't remove the bombs,
But we're
accept
all
that
wondering
Enchantress can't remove
secretly.
it. Yeah. So and knowing Jim Lee and his reputation, especially in the 90s with the X-Men and his work with Chris Claremont, his style of doing layouts and showing expression and just showing what's on the page is basically action, 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 action. And so I think that Rob Williams maybe was kind of trying to write towards that a little bit, where the pace of this story is like very brisk and everything happens very quickly, and you really don't get the character moments, like the smaller character moments, until you read the backup stories, which are by the same writer, but there's just not time in the main narrative for that. So it feels like a lot of those plot convenience things too were kind of there because they're like, well, we have to get to the next set piece kind of thing. So it's
and that you bring up the point that I wanted to make too, which was the B stories, or the backup issues that or stories that focus on a specific character. I liked those insights, but I would have preferred those come at the beginning than at the end, because most of what happens at the end of each issue is something is kind of escalating, and we're going to see the continuation or how it resolves in the next issue. So then to have this character moment at the end, for me, kind of like made me feel uneasy at my jumping off point of one issue. Whereas I felt like doing it at the beginning would have also given more weight to what happens in the story. Because in the issue where Captain Boomerang is basically vaporized him with a phaser from Star Trek, we then see his character moment at the end. And I kind of felt like if I had seen the character moment at the beginning of like, hey, this is a little bit of backstory about Boomer, who he is, what he's done, and why he's here, and what kind of guy he is. And then we see him get blown to smithereens. It's like, oh, you had to vaporize Captain Boomerang. He was actually kind of cool, instead of the other way around. Here's this guy. He's kind of annoying. He got vaporized. By the way, he's got some heart to him. Oh, really? Or does he? Maybe it's all a lie. We don't know. Okay, moving on, because we're not going to see him anymore until like the final act of the story. So I felt like I liked them. I just wish that they had come at the beginning of the issue instead of at the end.
So one thing that they did in the trade to alter the story structure, and I know that this is not how the original issues read, but I think it was a better choice, is they have the first half of issue 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the first half of the trade, and then all the character backups at the back of the trade.
Oh,
So you're reading one continuous thing for the first arc, and then again, second trade, 5, 6, 7, 8, you read the whole narrative, and then you get the character backups after that.
hmm.
And I think that made it read a lot better. And what I actually
Yeah.
did for this read through, especially because I was doing the synopsis, I was like, I'm just going to read the first half of both trades first. So I can just go straight through the story. I'm not distracted by the backups. And
Hmm.
then it actually was this morning on a different day that I read the character backups, because I was like, all
Okay.
right, now I'll do the deeper dive into like who these people are. And so that was cool because I kind of got those more as an isolated thing as opposed to
Hmm.
having it shoved in like every other chapter
Yeah, like a
is
commercial
let's take a
break.
break and slow down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how they originally published it. I think I prefer how the trade set it up for sure, though,
Yeah.
because it just reads better.
Right. But it was nice though, because either way you read them, it
Hmm.
gave us kind of like a glimpse into the person that is, this villain. So it kind of gives us a place to sort of talk about that character and establish something positive about them, something why we care about them, humanize them. So that way they're not just weapons, or they're not just criminals or villains or whatever, but they're actual people who are forced to live in these like high pressure, high stakes situations like every day. Every mission is not just Mission Impossible, because that is like
Right.
really, hardcore level, but it's a step even further than that of Mission Impossible. And if you fail, but you survive, you'll be executed. So not just disavowed, but they will know where you
Right.
are and they will trigger a bomb in your head and you're done. So there is no what is it, Rogue Nation, or there's so many Mission Impossible
No,
movies,
no, you
but
you
it,
can't.
Ghost Protocol. There's no Ghost Protocol, because if you try to get off the system, boop, you're done.
And Waller can always just explain anything that's going on that looks bad as, well, that was a supervillain attack. And then
Yeah,
there's your excuse. So they're basically disavowed before they even start.
right.
Like they're like, you have no backup. We're gonna throw you in there. We don't really care if you live or die. Get the mission done.
It's
That's
like,
kind
this
of
mission, you have no choice but to accept it. You will go in and do this and
exactly.
that. And if you are failed, we will follow if you fail, we will follow protocol and blow your head up and you will be dead. So you might as well die in service of trying to complete the mission so that you might live, but if you try to save your life, then it will be forfeited for you. Great.
Yeah, they're
Okay,
all they're
sign
all
me up.
kind of screwed. Um, Deadshot, I think, is probably the most, or one of the more sympathetic characters, because he does have a kid.
Hmm.
He does do a lot of what he does, honestly, to protect her or keep her away from what his life is. I don't really know the circumstances of Zoe Lawton's birth, but I know that he was already a contract killer, and he's kind of like, I don't want her anywhere near what I'm doing. So he basically just cut her off. But then, of course, villains will find out, like the head of Cobra finds out that he has a kid and kidnaps her. And yeah, like he won't hesitate to shoot that guy in the head, even though he was supposed to be teaming up with Batman. And Batman was like, well, you'll just use rubber bullets. And he's like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, no
But,
problem.
but he has that sore spot where if somebody threatens his kid, he's going to kill them. And
Yeah.
he does do things that, are pretty morally gray. Like, I mean, a lot of the people he kills are just for money. I think I would consider Deathstroke almost as having more of a code than Floyd.
Yeah.
Floyd seems like he's a little bit more motivated just by like, just get me to the next job. And he
It's like a
always has this
personal
thing where
code rather than a warrior's
yeah,
code. It's like, I'm in it
right,
for me and this is my code and how I survive, versus
sure,
Deathstroke, who's kind of more like, this is the warrior's code. We all follow this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a very good way to explain it, I think. Deadshot also always has this thing where he says that he doesn't care if he lives or dies, and that
Hmm.
he wants to die and blah blah blah. And Waller kind of calls him on it in this story where she's like, I don't buy that, because there's a million ways that you could have died on any of these missions, and it would have been
Yeah.
so easy for you. Like, all you have to do is walk away and I'll kill you. So, like, I don't really buy that
Yeah.
that's your thing, which is kind of like, oh, she's, inside my head a little bit.
Just try to escape. That's all you have to do is try to escape,
But
and then it's over. So why
yeah,
not just
exactly.
do that if you want to end it quickly? But yeah, he doesn't. And that's what I mean is like we get to see with this kind of more like the people that are underneath. If you look
Mhm.
past the villainy, if you look past the evil deeds, you see that there's still a person underneath. And we kind of get to
Right.
see glimpses of them, especially Harley, who just we get to see back into her past where, essentially where it's like who she was before she became Harley Quinn, crazy
Yeah.
psycho girl. Like it was neat to see that, especially in the context of the story that was going on, because everything was like, chaotic, and we really need to get a lid on things because people are turning on each other and all this stuff. And then there's Harleen Quinzel with her glasses on and her lab coat, and she's just like, "All right, so this is what's going on, and it looks like we need to do something here, and wow, I feel really clear and all this stuff." And it was just like it was cool to see that because we
Yeah.
usually either see the crazy or we see like a moment of sanity and then she plunges right back into insanity. This was like we got to
Yeah.
spend almost a whole issue there, and that was kind of cool. So it's
Yeah.
like seeing the people underneath the villains and making them, humanizing them a little bit more. That doesn't condone what they do. It just makes it more interesting to read about.
Right, for sure. Um, I had noticed that, and I want to kind of circle back to that point because about talking about the characters, but they use the same lineup in this book by editorial mandate that the 2016 Suicide Squad movie did, minus Hack. That's because the movie was coming out. They're like, we want the comic to represent what's in the movie.
Yeah.
And so this team was what Rob Williams was told. Here's the team you're working with, basically. Um, there were a lot of characters though that I felt like, I mean, Harley was definitely one.
Hmm.
They explored her a lot more. I mean, it partially helped that they didn't have to get her origin story out of the way in like 10
Yeah.
minutes, but they explored her a lot more in this story. Also, Katana, especially in her like backup story, I was like,
Yeah.
they showed way more of her than what they like. It was just a waste to have her in the Suicide Squad movie at all, like because they
Right.
really didn't do anything with her. And in this story, she's crucial to them succeeding. And you get a backstory that actually explains like how she got the Soul Taker, why, like kind of what she's about, and yeah.
That's
So
one thing I really appreciate about team books is when they can find a way to make everybody to draw out what's unique about them and how they contribute to the team. So it's like everybody's fighting Zod and Killer Croc, he
mhm.
just can't cut it. Boomer, obviously he's done for with the first blast from Zod's eye lasers. But then we have
Ugh.
Katana, and you're like, what's she gonna do? Well, her sword is powered by magic, which the
Mhm.
Kryptonians with their superpowers are vulnerable to magic, which Enchantress should have been able to just take care of it right then and there.
Yeah.
She should have put him in a box that like shrunk until he like squished or something. But Katana, at least it gave her something to do specific that only she could do because she impaled him on her sword because it was powered by magic. And that was really
Yeah.
cool. But then Rick Flag takes the sword from her and is like, let me finish him off. Boom. And it's like, okay, well, you just stole Katana's
Yeah.
thing that she's even named after. And you took it away. Like it shouldn't function if in someone else's hands. It should have been only her. Like if someone picks it up, the souls and the sword should go, not doing it. But
I
that's just my
agree,
take.
especially because they establish in the backstory that they show that the Soul Taker was originally being used against her by her
Mm,
brother-in-law, who killed her husband and her children. Um, and the Soul Taker actually chose her over
right.
the like her brother-in-law that was wielding it. So she's like the chosen wielder of the Soul Taker. That's why she was able to turn the tables and kill him and get her revenge, and then kind of move on and become a vigilante or whatever
Yeah.
whatever she is. So yeah, that being established, that was in one of the later backups, but once I read that, I really was kind of like, man, it sucks that they let Rick Flag take it,
Yeah.
because really it's her thing. It should be her sword. And it was such a cool moment whenever it's like almost this full page splash of her just like slashing Zod across the chest. And I was
That
like,
was
oh,
cool.
I forgot about her. I forgot that she could do that.
Yeah.
So
Well, and Enchantress was a little bit distracted because of what happened
yes.
with Killer Croc, which was hilarious and weird and just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they went there, especially with the panel of them like, you know, cuddling each other when everybody walks in,
Yes.
and it's like, okay, that's not where I thought this
Harley's
was
like,
going, but
oh, I think it removes inhibitions. Um,
you think?
yeah, so the Croc Enchantress relationship is something that will like carry on for a while in the book.
Hmm.
So that doesn't go away anytime soon. It's sort of like, I know I'm referencing Star Trek a lot, but I keep making these connections in my brain. It's like in Insurrection where Worf is like, the anomaly or the briar patch just brought your feelings out to breathe, but the way you've
Hmm.
felt about her never changed. It's kind of like
Yeah.
what they felt something for each other, and the Black Vault just like brought it to the surface. So
Yeah.
there you
Right.
go.
Got over the awkward like questioning and fears and insecurity and was
Sure.
just like, well, this is what I want, so I'm going to go for it. And they both wanted the same thing and they
Right.
went for it. But
Exactly.
getting off of that topic and going back to the question about the movie, I hate to
Oh
say it,
yeah.
but like it really did having the movie and especially the video game and this
Hmm.
comic kind of align with the characters that I was familiar with really helped me to get into this and appreciate it. And if they had had
Sure.
characters in here that were not from those, other adaptations
Hmm.
or just, off the wall characters that we don't really hear about too often, it would have been, I think I would have rated this lower and I would have not enjoyed it as much because I couldn't get into it. So I hate to say it, but like being forced to have at least some of the characters that more people are familiar with
Sure.
kind of helps you get into it a little bit more. But I would say that they don't have to go with the exact same lineup and tell the story exactly the same and have the artist renderings of them look exactly the same as the movie. Like, I think that's when you go too far. But
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
familiar faces in there, I mean, like if you
Hmm.
go to a party and you don't know anybody, it's like, I don't want to be here. But if you at least know one
Sure.
person, you feel a little bit more comfortable, like, okay, we'll kind of just hang back here and see what happens. So it's kind of like that with the comic where, if you
Hmm.
give us, I mean, Waller is always there, but give us some familiar
Sure.
faces for those of us who
But
haven't
she's
been
not
reading it.
likable.
No, no. She has no humanity. We don't see any character humanity
She really
moments with her.
doesn't.
But yeah, so that was kind of what I thought. But Heck was different though because she was kind of like more substantial here because she was looking for
Hmm.
something in a system that she didn't trust. It's like she can navigate the digital landscape, but her motivations are still human. She is not an AI. She is a real person who can exist in the world with AI and understand them, but it's kind of like this duality of she's kind of in one world and the other, but she still wants something for herself. Whereas in the game, it was kind of more like, she was a plot device. And they even went the fangirl route
Yeah.
in the comic to be like, she's got tattoos on her of Harley Quinn. She has the little like diamonds on her face, like Harley Quinn that she put on there. Like she is
Hmm.
a real fangirl of Harley Quinn. And Harley's like, I'm going to have to, contact my image rights attorney because you've my face plastered all over you. Like that can't be right. But but it's funny because she, it's like she really likes Harley and she likes her too
Hmm.
much that she actually wants to join the Suicide Squad and have a bomb in her head to be like the person that she idolizes, which is like, okay, definitely too far. But I kind of get the sense that she's like
Yeah.
young and naive, and she her sense of purpose and justice inside of her for herself is a lot greater than anything else that exists out in the world. So it kind of, but it made her feel more raw, like a real character that will be developed in future issues. And so that's a great place to
Yeah.
start. So I felt like this one had more potential than like in the game. Was that kind of your experience with it, or did you? Okay.
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed with her portrayal in the game, unfortunately. I mean, just because she actually does have a backstory, like, she grew up in this sort of war-torn nation, and and there was
Yeah.
all this death and like horrible stuff around her, and they didn't have a lot of stuff from like other countries, but she had some magazine with Harley on it, and she saw Harley as like this symbol of complete freedom where you can just do whatever you want. And that's like something that she never had because she's living in this dictatorship, and like her family members are dying and all this stuff. And so that seemed like, I guess, something that she kind of idealized, whereas like maybe the real Harley is not what her
Yeah.
idea of her actually is. But yeah, because she's young and naive, she's kind of like, well, I want to go out there and be like her, and I have these powers now, so
Because that'll
I want
fix
to be a
everything.
super villain, not a superhero.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that's not a good way for you to go. And if you're going to be a supervillain, probably the worst place you can go is to the Suicide Squad,
Yeah. Right.
because now you're essentially in servitude to Waller for the rest of your life. And unless you can find some way to get away from her, but that doesn't seem to happen very often.
I think that's really
So
hard too to do with the teleporter character, because like the
yeah.
Inhumans have a teleporter character, the X-Men have a teleporter character, everybody's got
Mhm.
a teleporter character, and it's like they are absolutely essential to the story because they are the way that you get your characters from point A to point B very quickly and have it be grounded sort of in reality, or you know
Mhm.
fiction reality. But like actually giving them screen time or panel time to take some time to humanize them, to give them a backstory, is hard because you don't want to give them too much page time, because then it's like they're always there when the team teleports. They go on every mission. They're a vital component. They are also a person who's being developed and has a backstory. And it's like they could steal the show very quickly. So I thought they
Yeah.
did a really good job in this of balancing all of the characters to where it didn't feel like one of them stole the show more than the others, unless it was their moment to shine. Like
Mhm.
Rick Flag was maybe a little bit more in the background than some of the others, but he's,
Sure.
I would argue, not as interesting because he's not unhinged like the Suicide Squad is. Usually him and
Right.
Waller are having a sane discussion on one side, while Boomer is, irritating Deadshot, and Harley is just being weird, and Killer Croc is thinking about lunch, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but I think they all got kind of like their time to shine, but they didn't overpower, because
Mhm.
that was the thing about the movie, is everybody's like, Harley Quinn is awesome. She's the greatest. We want to see Harley Quinn. And it's like nobody else matters because she stole the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got 3 movies with her. Rick Flag is technically in 2 of the movies. But yeah, 3 movies with Harley, whereas the other characters really didn't get the development. Killer Croc, it feels like way more of a person in this than he did in the
Yeah.
Suicide Squad movie, where he was basically there because there was one part of the story where they needed somebody to swim, and I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I guess. Like but he didn't really contribute a whole lot because in that movie they were fighting Enchantress, and really none of them can do anything against her.
Right.
So it really was, I don't know, they maybe should have picked a different roster or something. There actually is something called the Suicide Squad Black, that is the magic team of villains that are in the Suicide Squad. So I don't know how they keep Gentleman Ghost under control. If there's some way that I know that Nth Metal damages him because he's a Hawkman villain, but I don't know how you
Hawkman!
like. Yeah, Hawkman.
Hawkman!
How do you like damage a ghost and keep him in line to make him go on missions? But there is, at least for a short time, they experimented with the idea of doing a Suicide Squad Black team, which would have made more sense for the threat that they were fighting in the movie. It's just that those characters aren't really as popular. So,
Yeah.
and
I
I was actually annoyed at the time that Croc was in the movie at all, because I just finished reading like 5 years of Suicide Squad comics where it was Harley, Deadshot, King Shark. And I felt like
mm,
they dropped out King Shark and put Croc in just because he was a Batman villain. And Batman is the cash cow.
yeah.
And I was like, man, why couldn't we have had King Shark like from the get-go? Like I read a whole bunch about him. Like I had already grown to like him and everything. So I was glad when James Gunn finally used him in his version of the Suicide Squad, but it almost kind of felt like too little too late for me. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Real quickly, I guess I wanted to mention I like the idea of the Annihilation Brigade. It's just that this story didn't have room for that complication, really. So
Yeah.
they introduce them, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense because the Romulans have the Tal Shiar, and the Federation has Section 31, and the Russians have the Annihilation Brigade, and the United States has the Suicide Squad. But then they're on panel maybe like 4 or 5 times, and they're dispatched really easily. So I kind of wondered, like, why were they in the story at all? Because they don't really contribute anything, and it felt like they were just there to be a cliffhanger at the end of an issue. And then it's like one of those two-parters where you come back and there's a gun at somebody's head, but then the resolution is somebody just goes and like swats it out of the
Yeah.
way, and then
In
you
two
keep
seconds
going.
and we're done. Yep.
So
Well,
yeah.
the cliffhanger was more of the time between the story than the actual story itself. But
Right.
I don't know. I kind of wondered, like, maybe they are like a cheap knockoff. Like everybody's like, oh, Suicide Squad, we need to hop on the bandwagon, like people do. And they
Right.
hop on the
Right.
bandwagon, but they're a cheap copy. They're replicating the manipulation, but not the mission. Like they don't have
Hmm.
Waller, they don't have the more humanized characters like in the Suicide Squad. So that's why they kind of get brushed aside so quickly. That was kind of how I looked at it, as like, well, maybe they're posers. And
They
it's
kind of
like, hey,
suck.
let the real Suicide Squad deal with this threat. Get out of the way. Or
Hmm.
Task Force. Let the real Task Force X deal with it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Works for me.
Um, yeah. So one of the things that I thought Rob Williams actually did pretty well was his use of humor, and I didn't
Yeah.
remember it from my last read through of this, but all of the character interactions feel genuine
Mm-hmm.
even when they're being like over the top. Like we have Croc like throwing up in his helmet because he can't handle space. And and then later, Harley does a callback to it where, Enchantress transforms and starts talking about how she's gonna boil bones and rip out entrails. And Harley's like, this monologue is gonna make Croc hurl again. And and then when June meets Zod, she's like, I don't even want to be here. I'm just a graphic designer. He's like, die, graphic designer.
Or he's like graphic designer team or something. He thinks the Suicide
Oh,
Squad, that's
yes. He
like,
thought
oh,
that was
it's
the name of their team.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that the humor actually really landed for me in this. And that is, to me, especially with writing Harley Quinn, the mark of either a really bad or really good writer, because she's a character that you can very easily make annoying if you're
Mm-hmm.
not careful.
Yeah.
And I feel like she was funny without going over that line where I was just like, ugh, I wish she would shut up, because there are some writers that I don't know, it's like they're trying too hard or something, and they'll try and make her even jokier, and I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, like let's
Well, because
get
they're
on with
they're
it,
trying to balance the seriousness of the like bleak situation they're in by trying to
Right.
manufacture humor to balance it, but it can't be manufactured, and it has to be like it has to match the character. So like even having Croc throw
Mhm.
up in his helmet, it's funny and it's goofy, but it's also like it kind of shows that Croc has this vulnerability. Like he may be this big
Mhm.
monster, but like anybody else, if he throws up in his helmet, it's not good for him, that kind of thing. It's like he's not
Yeah.
impervious to that. And is it a character flaw or is it a weakness like kryptonite, barf in a helmet? I mean, you would, it's not a conversation, but it kind of is because it's kind of funny. And it's like, well, you could think about it and be like, would that cut off his, but could he swim in it? Like he would swim in, the sewer or something? Ugh, gross, but
Well, they
still
seem
like,
to think that he's going to drown because that's
yeah.
actually what causes their whole breach of their ship at the beginning. Because once they enter the atmosphere, Flag's like, well, he's going to drown in there, so I have to like open his helmet, and which is really gross.
Yeah.
But
But it's funny too, and it kind of gives us a little like it makes you feel for Croc a little bit because he doesn't just walk
sure.
out like the big monster and just like, all right, I'm ready, it's clobbering time. I'm gonna, scratch things and bite things and rip things open. I'm this deadly, fierce looking creature. It's like, look at this
Mhm.
deadly, fierce looking creature. Oh, he just threw up in his helmet and he's gonna drown. Like kind of balancing out the scary aspects of it. Like I felt like it was I I felt like it was tasteful, not the, barfing part because that's not tasty, but I thought that the humor was tasteful. I should
Yeah.
have used a different word there,
Yeah.
but I went with it. I hear how it sounds,
That's a
Lemon, and I
terrible
don't care.
image.
That's the best presentation I've ever seen, Liz Lemon.
Yeah, it was
Synergy.
sort of the best case scenario. Synergy, we have synergy right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Workplace synergy or podcast synergy.
Hmm.
It's the best case scenario with humor when you feel like it's informed by the character and it's not just insert joke here.
Sure.
Um, the example of that I always go to, and I hate to do this because I love Doctor Strange, the first movie, is fantastic,
I've come to
but it's
bargain.
but it's very clear every time they brought in another screenwriter just to insert a joke because the test audience was like, this movie isn't light enough or something
Yeah.
like that. So it's very clear when like another writer comes in and he says a joke and then they move on. And I think it's that kind of thing where I'm like, that takes me out of it. So
Yeah.
if I feel like the character interactions are informing the humor, then that makes it where you're kind of learning, kind of like you said, like you're kind of learning something about the characters while they're giving each other crap. Like
Right.
Boomer and Deadshot absolutely hate each other, and that dynamic comes into play a lot. Where like when he comes back, Deadshot's just like, ah, crap, or something like that. He's like, I thought he was finally gone,
Yeah.
and
It's like I'm sad to lose a member of the team, but if I had to lose one member, I'm okay with it being him. And then
that's
it's like, oh, he's back. Hooray. Blink, blink.
well, and Boomerang is kind of, I mean, he is. I don't know the I guess kid friendly way to say it, but he's an idiot. Yeah, he's an idiot. I mean, he thinks that he talks a really big game and he uses a lot of like foul language and he's trying to be this tough guy, but he's really a coward that's going to run away if stuff gets too bad. And so
And not come
they actually
back
kind of yeah, and not come
like a
back.
boomerang.
There's actually like in the old Suicide Squad stories, there's a whole section where he got bored with the Suicide Squad missions, and so he was on like good behavior with Waller. So she was like, "Fine, you can go drink at a pub every once in a while." Well, instead of going to the pub, he like stole Mirror Master's outfit and started stealing things for fun as
Nice.
Mirror Master. And so then to sort of like frame him, Waller's like, well, I'm gonna recruit Mirror Master on the Suicide Squad. And so Boomer's having to change back and forth between the two outfits because like
Oh,
they're both
geez.
supposed to be on this mission, and it was like a Mrs. Doubtfire kind of thing. But like that's his role, is to be like just the idiot that he's kind of there, and like I guess we don't want him to die, but he's kind of a liability too. So I felt like Williams wrote him really well. It's a shame that he was dead for half the story because he's very entertaining for the parts where he is
Yeah.
there.
Man, I'm
So
just thinking about like the movie Mrs. Doubtfire now, and when Robin Williams is going back and forth, between the meeting, and
yeah.
he's like trying to get into each character, and it's kind of tough. Like imagining Boomer doing that with himself and Mirror Master. Like, oh,
And
geez.
he's a lot worse at it than Robin Williams.
Oh, I bet.
So yeah.
Uh, So yeah, I really wanted to talk about the art in this one because usually I don't have a lot to say because I'm kind of more looking at the comic and what's happening, and the visuals are sort of serving to illustrate, what's going on with the text. But I felt very differently in this one, and I don't know that I felt this way before reading a comic, so it was really interesting. But like
Mm,
the visual style looked to me like it was like animation. Like, I almost wish that the text bubbles would go away and that I could just watch this as a movie. And I'm not trying to take the lazy way out, but it looked very
sure.
cinematic to where I was almost wanting the visuals to tell the story more than the text. Like the text actually
Hmm.
started to uh, get away from me a little bit in some of the more exposition heavy sections. And like, especially when there was an action scene, I was like, okay, I don't need all these words while I'm watching this action,
Sure.
like an analysis of first I'm going to punch you here and then I'm going over this way and then I'm going to go over here, that kind of thing where it's like
Mm,
you're narrating what you're doing during the fight sequence. Like if that's the character, okay, but if that's just, a general thing, I tend to kind of tune out on the text and focus on the visuals. So that's how I felt reading almost this whole story. Was I was more interested in the visuals because they were really good. Like they really
mm,
conveyed, I felt like, the characters and what the story was trying to do. I could have just used maybe less text. Like I didn't feel like this was another novel writer where we just got like walls and walls and walls of text. But I also
Yeah.
kind of thought like maybe tone down the text a little bit or find an artist who isn't quite as good and have them not because I felt like it was stealing the show. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Get that
Yeah.
text bubble out of my way.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jim Lee is famous. He's one of the richest comic book pencilers in the history of the medium. I mean, and there's a reason for that because he's really, really good at what he does.
Yeah.
To me, it always takes me a second when I start looking at one of his books to remember, oh, this isn't an X-Men book because I associate his style so much with the X-Men. In fact,
Ah,
the outfits and the look and everything that you saw in the X-Men 1994 animated series, that's all based on Jim Lee's work. So there's a very specific look to that era of X-Men, and he's carried that
yeah.
style forward into everything else he does. But it always takes me a second to go, okay, yeah, I'm reading Suicide Squad because just the way he does expressions, the way he does action, all of that kind of cinematic tone, that was one of the reasons that he exploded in the first place in the 90s was because the things he was doing looked more like movies and nobody was doing that at the time.
Hmm.
And having panels that where you've got characters breaking out with like the sword going across one of the page breaks or something and things like that where you're kind of playing with the medium a little bit more. Yeah, he's really experienced, and I mean his reputation is definitely earned in the industry.
Yeah.
At this point, if I had to guess, I think the reason why we had backup stories though is because and we can get into this more in the after show when we talk about him, but Lee is a father of 9 children. He's been married to that he has all with the same woman. And he also is the chief creative officer and publisher of DC Entertainment when this is coming out. So he has all kinds of like business
Hmm.
managerial roles at DC as well as doing the pencils as well. So he kind of has a reputation for stuff being delayed really badly. So I have a feeling, especially because during this time they were shipping every 2 weeks a new issue. I have a feeling that he was like, let me do half, you can do a backup story in the other half, and then I'll actually have time to kind of like do it right.
Yeah.
But I have seen art of his before that looks rushed because of the demands of his other jobs and stuff, and I didn't feel that this time at all. it felt
That's
it felt
good.
very polished and like he got the time to kind of make everything look the way that he wanted it to. And there's just a lot of really exciting stuff done with the action. There's a part where Harley gets thrown through a window, and you see her landing with like her foot up on the soldier that she's kicking in the face, and like Katana's right next to her, and all the
Hmm.
glass is breaking in and everything. And yeah, you could just see it being animated because everything looks like it's
Yeah.
in
Like
motion.
mid
So
frame.
he's a very good fit for this title, especially if the writer is writing towards what he can do well, which is let's have a lot of action. Let's have some crazy set pieces where we're at an underwater station, or we're fighting in this lab that's destroyed, and there's a red sun lamp and all that stuff. Those are the things that Jim Lee does really well. So I feel like, I hope at least, that Williams and Lee were kind of getting together on like, okay, well, what do you want to do? How do you want to tell this story? But to your point, too much narration is a problem with really all comic book artists that are working with kind of a veteran artist. It's almost like you're going, I don't quite trust you to tell the story, and so they overwrite it a little bit. That didn't
Could be
stand out to
editors
me
too.
terribly. Yeah, it could be editors. That's true. Um, but I didn't feel that this was super overwritten necessarily. It was just some of the narration boxes they could have gotten rid of. Keep all the dialogue, that's fine.
Hmm.
Like that's all great. But yeah, sometimes the narration or getting inside a character's head when we're in the middle of like a huge action sequence doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
so
So
so yeah.
it's funny because, like, so it sounds like a lot of the things that drew me to enjoy this comic the way that I did, without giving
Hmm.
away my final thoughts and rating, was that one, we had characters I was familiar with from like the movie and other media. So I fell for that
Mhm.
trap, that marketing trap. And then also we had an artist on here who worked at Marvel and really shaped a lot of things from Marvel, which is something,
Yes.
I'm more into Marvel than DC. So now you have two things that draw me in to where I normally may not have given this as high of a rating, but now you've got something to kind of like bring me into it of like, oh, the art, feels like it's just natural and it works
Mhm.
and it just feels familiar to me somehow, and these characters are
Mhm.
familiar, and so I want to hear the story. But then when you get me in the story, we've got a writer who can then take these villainous characters on the outside and humanize them and show us the people underneath all of the villainy. So it's like all
Mhm.
these layers built upon each other that I think came together really well, and just made the whole thing kind of like, I guess, pop as a series, because you have all these things
Mhm.
working for it. But it's funny because it's like typically we kind of bash those things like, oh, they just had to throw in characters from the movie or whatever to get comic book sales. But I mean, it kind of works, and that's why they do it, is because it works sometimes, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that
Mhm.
it's funny to kind of realize that. But
Well, I think this is a best case scenario of two people taking the assignment they were given and making something really good out of it. I
yeah,
personally prefer these 8 issues to the Suicide Squad live action movie, like the first one. I think that it tells a more entertaining story. The stakes
mm,
with General Zod being there certainly seem
yeah,
high. So it's not just like, oh, one of the team turned bad. And I think that the thing that really takes the steam out of the original Suicide Squad film for me is when El Diablo just transforms into a giant monster and pushes Enchantress back, and that's how they win. I'm like, so the
yeah.
team didn't do it. El Diablo could have like saved them the whole time. Like that was kind of lame to
It's kind of
me. So
clunky,
it felt like in this everybody had a reason to be there and they had something to contribute to the team. So
right?
that which is a lot more fun in a team book. You don't want to see, like you said, here's the team book. It's all about Harley Quinn, because
Mm,
she's got her own title. Do that over there.
right.
So,
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we move to final thoughts?
yeah.
We like
Comics.
because they have no home.
All right, welcome back. So, using our freshness banana scale of starting with a low score of rotten, going all the way from rotten to bruised, fair, ripe, or delicious, how many bananas would I give, or what kind of banana would I give to uh, this comic? Well, that was a lot of setup there, but if you're on YouTube, check out the visuals. It really helps. But I would say this for me lands at a 4.25. And the reason that I use the decimal is strategic because I really felt like the pacing was off with those like confessionals at the end. Like I wanted to see
Mhm.
either confessionals maybe during the story, although that can get kind of hectic if the story is hectic, or maybe at the beginning. Let's highlight a character at the beginning and then maybe have their moment in the story itself, which is a little formulaic maybe, but at least it wouldn't break up the action so much. But also, if you read the trade, like you said, everything is at the end. So you read the entire story from start to finish, and then you get the confessionals afterwards. That's kind of, I think, best case scenario is like they're really good. Just when you mix them together, it's a little chaotic. So I
Mhm.
remove 0.25 points from my score. Instead of giving it a 4.25, I'm going to give it a 4.25, but it's still it's still ripe. It's still a really good banana, and I really enjoyed it. And I like the freshness of this banana, which is the Suicide Squad, the Black Vault, and Going Sane.
You
But
wouldn't think that that would be a fresh banana, but
but for all the reasons we talked about, because they humanized the characters and it was interesting,
Mhm.
and each character got a moment to shine. Like it was cool to see Captain Boomerang kind of come back as like a zombie digital ghost thing. It was cool to see Harley, kind of step back into her sanity again and kind of see what that was look like, and have her be the calm in the middle of everyone else being a storm instead of her being the storm in the middle of everyone else's calm. So that was a fun way to, flip everything on its head. And, we got to see Killer Croc and Enchantress in a new light. So that was interesting. And things like that. So I really appreciated those, and the character moments too really helped kind of illustrate things about their backgrounds. But I also liked that it was part of Waller's interrogation process where they tried to give her a fake truth or a fake story, and she kind of saw through it and was like, no, we know that it's actually like this. So that way there's no BSing. It's not, Dr. Doom writing his own origin story and telling us the way that he wants us to hear it, or the Joker making something up that's completely fiction and has nothing to do with his origin. But it's like we get to the heart of the character without the, BS, and Waller helps do that during those like one shots. So I thought, again, existing together is good, just not mixed together. And so
Sure.
4.25 bananas for the overall comic for me.
Yeah, so what you're saying is it's more of like a story structure problem than the story itself.
Yeah.
The way it was presented was disjointed, and that took away from your enjoyment, which I think is totally fair.
0.25.
If you were reading this as it came out, that would have been your experience, and then you would wait a month. And in my opinion, because you're only getting a half issue of narrative per issue, this reads a lot better in trade anyway. So I think if you're gonna seek it out, going for the trade is probably the way you should go, because that's kind of a better way to read it. Obviously, if you have the DC Universe app, I mean that's going to be the most
Yeah.
affordable thing to do.
Or you could
But if
set
you're
an alarm on your phone for 1 month, read the first issue, and then set a timer for 1 month, and then allow yourself to. Oh no, 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks, right? So
yeah, it was
just
two
space them
weeks.
out.
Mhm.
Nobody does that. If you do, let us know in the
No,
comments, because
no
I'd
one
be
does
really interested to
that.
hear your perspective, because that's some
Try
discipline
to
or something
explain
right there.
why you're not a weirdo. So I my final thoughts. The reason that I wanted you to go first is I've been trying to determine which of the character backups I enjoyed the most, because I actually did enjoy quite a few of them. I think honestly, my overall score for this is going to be the same as you. I think I'm going to give it a 4.25. I was probably going to give it a 4.5. What's dragging it down is not the story structure for me, but it is when you mentioned that the narration was getting in the way of the art a little bit. I
Yeah.
thought about it and I was like, that bugged me, but it didn't quite register because I was trying to get through it and write a synopsis, and sort of there's a little bit of disconnect
Like
that happens
logistical
sometimes
things.
when you're trying to deal with the logistics of like, I need to do this for the podcast, and also I need to try and read it and enjoy it as a story. So but once you brought that up, I was like, yeah, that is something that stood out to me. So I think I'm just going to dock it the 0.25 for that. The way I read it, the story structure was fine because the character backups were totally separate. And I have to say that I enjoyed it more this time than when I read it back in 2017, because
Nice.
back then I had already been reading Suicide Squad in the New 52, and the previous run was actually really good. So I come to this and I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing. They're just throwing all the movie characters in there and they're going to shove them down
Yeah.
our throats instead of the team that we've been following for the last however many issues. And I think I resented seeing the sort of business people like exert that control over the
Yeah.
creatives, and so I didn't give it as much of a chance. I kept reading it, and as it went on, it kind of got further and further away from what the movie was. I mean, this honestly is pretty far from what the movie is.
Yeah. It's
It's
its
not
own
the same
thing.
narrative at all. Yeah, but I definitely enjoyed it more now with some distance between me and the film, and just getting to enjoy it as a story on its own without really comparing it to anything else. So it's funny that like those comparisons to other things actually helped you be pulled in and enjoy it more, and they hampered my enjoyment. But now that I've had enough distance, they don't anymore. So we're landing at a 4.25, which is again a very ripe banana.
Nice.
For totally different reasons, but we can both agree that it was very good. And I guess real quickly, if I've got to pick a favorite backup, it's got to be Boomerang's. I mean, his backstory isn't really that complicated. His father abandoned him as a child. He was an American soldier, and his father always loved boomerangs, and he's got that sort of daddy issue thing where he's like trying to sort of, even though he's gone, like
He
he's
wants his
trying
dad to come
you know,
back like a boomerang.
I want to do right by him. Yeah, exactly. But the story that he tells Waller is about how he was an Australian secret agent that went to this other country, and he was doing this incredible heist for their government, and the name of the girlfriend that he made up is Sheila Up For It. And I was laughing so hard. I showed it to my fiance real quick. I was like, look at this. She's like, oh my gosh. And she's put her head in her hands. Yeah, his story, while it was like distracting from like his true pain or whatever, it was absolutely hilarious. So that was the high point of those.
Yeah, kind of like that James Bond satire kind of thing. Like that sounds like a good story that he would make up to cover up the truth, but
it does.
Nice. All right. Well, that is going to be a wrap on this episode of We Like Comics Because They Have No Bones. Make sure you head on over to our YouTube channel at Boneless Comics Podcast, where you can watch the video version of this episode and join us for the after show, where we will discuss the writer and penciler from our story today and dive even deeper into the history of the Suicide Squad.
That's right. And be sure to share your thoughts on social media at Boneless Comics Podcast or on Blue Sky Social or X at Boneless Comics 1. Use the hashtag Boneless Comics Podcast to let us know what you think of Suicide Squad, The Black Vault, and Going Sane.
And also make sure you visit our website at bonelesscomicspodcast.com, where you can listen to our other episodes, and shop on Printify, where you can order Mike's banana designs on t-shirts, mugs, and more.
Yes, and the Suicide Squad art is coming. It is not finished as the time of this recording, but I just have to color it and scan it, and then that should be available for everybody as well. So, next episode, we are going to be taking a look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Villains, which is an anthology series, a series of one-shots. So it is written and penciled by a lot of different writers and artists that we'll cover in that episode's after show, and it was published in 2013 by IDW, so don't miss it.
Cowabunga! Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Cowabunga!
Cowabunga!
We like
Comics.
because they